welcome in gems. We are going to be doing a part 2 of how to rig a 2D VTuber in Live2D Cubism. In this section, we're going to be covering how to set up warp deformers with your model. We might use something called rotation deformers. There's two types, warp deformer and rotation deformer, but we're going to stick to mostly warp, and I will talk about if we add rotation, we will add a few, we will be working with warp. I also do want to preface this video with saying that I am still very much new to Live2D Cubism as well. I am learning, but I figured as I am learning, I will share my knowledge. So if there's something I'm doing wrong, or there's something you see or you want to add to the conversation, feel free to drop that in the comments down below. I certainly don't know everything, but I'm always willing to learn, and I'm also figuring it out as you guys are figuring it out. So let's learn together and see what we can do. Okay, so again, if you don't have your model file open already, definitely open that up and make sure you open the example model. I will leave a link again to this down below if you don't have it. We did go over it in the first video as well. Again, this is just really helpful when you're working on your model to try and dissect and understand what to do. It's very important when you're learning programs like Live2D Cubism to try your best to dissect what is going on and why it's going on, because if you can gain that knowledge, then you will be equipped with all the tools you need to do things on your own and learn things on your own. And this is important to carry across all things when you are learning any subject, not just Live2D Cubism, learning in general. Cool. So as you can see here, there's a bunch of warp deformers. We're going to pretty much be following this. It's a little bit different because this is full body, but when we look over here, all these deformers go into a folder called core. Now we don't have a folder called core. Again, we're going to be mostly focusing on these sections right here. We'll be talking about parameters later. These are very important for rigging, but that will probably be in the next video. For right now, we're going to focus on our folders and setting up our deformers. Next, I would like you to click new folder, new part. You can create custom parts here with that button, and we're going to call this core. Okay, I'm going to move core down above the face folder here. And awesome. The first deformer you're going to want to make is called the breath warp. Now, to explain a little bit about what deformers do and what they are, they're the things that allow you to deform and move your 2D model around in a what seems like 3D space. It's a lot like a warp tool that you would use in something like Photoshop. And the reason why we can move our model like this is because when we assigned a mesh across everything, it uses these little guys right here to warp and deform. So without that, you would not be able to use warp deformers. So that's why it's very important to add a mesh like we did in the first video. And again, if you're just stumbling upon this video now, you could check out the first video of this series. And if you're trying to figure out how to get your Photoshop file into Live2D Cubism, you can also check out my other video that talks about cutting up your layers. So let's make the body warp Z first. What I'm going to do is go up here and click this button, warp, call it body warp Z, and this is going to be a parent. This uses a hierarchy system over here as well as a parent-child relationship. So for those who are not familiar with parent-child relationship means is basically the parent is in charge of anything that would go underneath, which would be children. So you can have multiple parents that have their own children, and basically whatever the parent is, the child will replicate or copy or somehow have something to do with, which is the overall group that hugs around the children. So if you're unfamiliar with those terms, that's what that means. Hopefully that'll be able to help you out. We can ignore these other settings for now. We're just going to do body warp Z in destination. Make sure you have core selected, and then we're going to click create. Now, as you can see, this is not going over the full body, and we want it to be covering the whole body because this is a body warp. So my thing did not start with covering it all. So what I'm going to do is hold down Control and Alt, and I'm going to make this bigger. Pull at the corner here. So you can hold down Control and Alt while dragging with your left mouse button to make it bigger or to resize those boxes. Great. Now we have it covering, it looks like everything. I'm going to pull it a little bit bigger just to be safe. There we go. Next, let's go down and see what we have. We got body warp Z, and as you can see, these little dots right here show that this is a child of the parent body warp Z. So we're going to want to make a child that is called body warp Y. I'm going to go to body warp Z, and I'm going to click on that. And anything, when you go down from this specific deformer, it should make a box that's a little bit smaller and inside, because again, that acts as the parent. You'll see what I mean in a few moments. So we're going to create another one. I'm just going to name this body warp Y. And instead of selecting as a parent, this is a child, because as we discussed earlier, we saw that it was a child. So we will do that and click create. And as you can see, the box went a little bit smaller. I am again going to make it bigger because with Control and Alt and hold that, because I just want to make sure we're covering all our bases because this is a body warp. Next, let's see, we got breath warp, and again, this is a child of body warp Z. So let's do breath warp. This will help create it so your avatar looks like they are breathing when we move it into a program later on. Breath warp, make sure it's a child, create. I'm going to move this down a bit and just move it here. I'm going to make that bigger again. There we go. For some of these, you will not need all of them depending on the model you're doing, but just for this case, if you're new, then I would say do all of them and we can delete or get rid of other stuff we might not need depending on your specific model. So we're gonna go ahead and do everything that's in here regardless. So I'm just gonna speed up this next section of the video and go through and make all of these. The same thing will happen with rotate. I'll actually make the rotator with you first, and then you'll know how to do that so that you can follow me along or slow down the video if you need to add all these different things. So next we're gonna do shoulder R. We're gonna do all these before we do any of the little drop downs into there. So let's do shoulder R off of breath warp first. So let's go back and we're gonna do a rotator. This is right here. And we're gonna do shoulder R. I don't remember what it's called, so I'll just call it shoulder R for now. And remember, this is a child of the breath warp. So we'll create shoulder R. Yep, it was just called shoulder R. Awesome. And then we're gonna do another one. Actually, make sure we check our bounding box here. So the rotator's right here. That's not in the right spot. Shoulder R. And also when you're doing right and left, I try to do the characters right and the characters left instead of my right and my left when I'm looking. I think you could technically do either, but to play it safe, I would say just go with doing your character. And if you want to mess around on your own time, figuring out if you can do it the other way around, be my guest. So we're just going to move this. I'm holding down Control and my left click to move it. That was just Control. We're going to get this in the right spot. That looks like that's good. And that will be fine. And now we're going to go to breath warp and we're going to do the shoulder L. I don't know if I spelled shoulder right. It looks kind of weird. Make sure it's a child. Great. Now we got shoulder L. And remember, we're going to move this over to here. So every time you set them up, I would say make sure that they're in the right position and where they need to be. So that looks good to me. Next, we are going to be adding another rotator to the breath warp as a child. So again, click on that breath warp and we're going to be clicking on our rotator and we're going to add neck position. We will visit this. There'll be a bunch of stuff in the neck position in the hierarchy here, but we will revisit that. Let's focus on getting the shoulder parts done. On neck position, make sure you readjust your rotator to about the center of the neck. Awesome. Go back to breath warp. Next, we're going to create another warp deformer, and this is going to be called body X warp. Create that. Okay, that's good to go. And then next you're going to want to create deformers off of breath warp for anything else that you have that could be accessories or extra pieces to your character. So in my case, we have a choker, a chest plate, and the arms are all merged as one. As you can see, I have the upper arm as one with the piece. I don't have the costume separate from that. We do have the chest as separate. Again though, right here in this section, we're going to focus on these outfit pieces. So try to apply this knowledge to whatever outfit your character might have. So go to breath warp, and I'm going to add a separate warp deformer for my chest plate. So just the center piece. Chest plate warp. Okay, and remember, I want to make sure these things are the right size. I'm going back to body X warp because this needs to be bigger. So again, we're going to hold down Control and Alt and make that big. And then for the chest plate warp, we want to go and size match the chest plate. So let's go maybe something like that there. Then we go back to breath warp. Next, we'll do a separate piece of the choker warp. Choker warp. Awesome. And then this we're going to shrink down to be the size of our choker. Awesome. With, remember, Control and Alt to do that. Now that should be good for our breath warps. Again, remember, we have all this stuff down here. We're ignoring that for now. We'll put them all in their rightful places after we get this all sorted out. Next, I'm going to go back to breath warp. Next, I'm going to go to shoulder R, and we're going to do the hierarchy that needs to go in here. So on shoulder R, we are basically going to split this into an upper arm and a lower arm portion with both rotators and warp deformers. Just follow along if that sounded confusing to you. So go into shoulder R. We're going to create another rotator. We're going to do shoulder, or whoops, my bad. We're going to, do upper arm R, create, and let's hold down Control and move this to her right. Again, I like to put mine on the side of the character's right. So this is the character's right, my left, but the character's right. And then we will do a child of this and do a warp deformer. And this is just going to be called upper arm R warp. So you got your upper arm, you can go ahead and collapse that. We'll go back to shoulder R, and then we're going to do another rotator and call this, we're going to do lower arm R. Create that. And then we're going to create, let's drag it. And we're going to create a warp deformer for that and call that lower arm R warp. And you know what to do. We got to bring this to our lower, hold Control Alt, move that over, do the same thing here. Awesome. right arm should be set. Now we're gonna go to shoulder L. We're gonna do the same type of thing. I will speed the section of the video up. Literally just copy everything you did with the shoulder R, but make it left instead. Slow down the video if you feel that you need to. Nice, shoulder R and shoulder L are done. Now we're gonna move on to the hierarchy that goes with the neck position. Okay, next we are doing the neck position. So the first thing we're gonna add to neck position is a face rotator. So go ahead and click your rotator up here. We're gonna type in face rotator. Potato, I don't know what I'm saying, help. We're gonna do as a child of selected object, create, and let's move the face rotator right there. Cool. And now we're gonna go back to neck position over here, and we're going to do a whole bunch of different hierarchies that are children of the neck position. So make sure you click the neck position before making each one of these things. Okay, so if you have blushy marks, you have cheeks, you will be adding cheeks. I don't remember if mine are, yeah, they are on their own layer. Okay, cool. So we're gonna go warp deformer. You're gonna type in cheeks. I totally just butchered how you spell cheeks. Okay. As a child, create. And remember to make sure that you bring up your bounding box by holding Alt, and we can hold down Alt Control and make it about the size of the cheeks here. Let's go about there. Cool. And I'm gonna add, okay, go back to neck position. Now we're gonna do both the eyebrow warps. So create, we're gonna do brow R warp. Bring this up. Make sure this is her right, which would be this eyebrow over here. Brow warp, R warp, and then we're going to do back to neck position, brow L warp, brow L warp, and then bring that up, shrink that down, move that there. Cool. Brow L, we got both brows. Go back to neck position. Now we're gonna do both the eye warps. So let's go warp. First we'll start with I R warp, her R, and let's do an I L warp, I L warp. Okay, go back to neck position. We're gonna do a mouth warp next. Mouth warp. Let's put that there. Okay, go back to neck position. We're gonna do face warp next. So this is encompassing all the face warp. Create, bring that up. Let's shrink that down a bit. We got about there, that's good. Go back to neck position. We got hair loose. So this is for my little loose piece of hair here. You can break this down into sections however you want. So I'm gonna do hair loose. Depending on your character's hair, try to break it up into segments that make sense. You'll see here what I mean. So hair loose, I'm gonna bring this up, make that smaller. Let's go like that for there. Then we're gonna go back to neck position, and next we're gonna do hair back warp. So I'm gonna separate it into sides, front, back. Hair back warp. We might change this later. This is, remember, just a starting point, because when we do hair physics and stuff, I might have to change some warping systems around or add more warp, but this is a good base to start with aside from physics. Okay, this is hair back, so actually this needs to be pretty long. Let's go maybe make that a little bit bigger just in case. Cool, and then we're gonna go back to neck position, hair back warp. Next we gotta do nose. Need a nose warp. We'll bring that. Okay, neck position, ear. So do your ears, whatever, if you have human ears, wolf ears. We'll do wolf ear R. Wolf ear R. This is her right, so we're gonna go ahead and move that about there. Wolf ear R, neck position, wolf ear L. Wolf ear L. Create. Bring that down. We're gonna shrink that up a bit. Then neck position, we're gonna do hair front. So this is when we're gonna do hair front. So the hair front is referring to the bangs for me. We're gonna make that about as big as the bangs here. We'll say that's good. Then we're gonna do a hair R warp and a hair L warp, right and left. Hair R warp, hair right. Let's go back to neck position, hair L. Hair L warp. Okay, there's the left side. Perfect. Go back to neck position. We're gonna create one called neck warp as well. And I'm gonna put neck warp right now outside of it. So I just dragged it out and it's underneath my choker warp and all that stuff. I'm actually gonna drag, I led you guys slightly astray. Just click all these guys and go ahead and drag them into the face rotator And then we're gonna bring the neck warp, drag that onto the neck position. So this one should be outside, connected to the next position, and the face rotator should be connected to the rest of everything that we just made. All right, next we're gonna dive into the all the sub stuff of everything that's inside children's of the face rotator. So let's do brows next. We are going to our brow R warp. You can skip over cheeks. Cheeks is done. Brow R warp. We're gonna create a new deformer and we're gonna call this brow R position. All right, as a child, perfect, and make sure that's on the brow too. It should automatically link in. Cool. And then we're also gonna do another one, which is a child of brow R position called brow R angle. Nice. So we got all that. That's good to go. Then we're gonna do the same thing with brow L warp. So we're gonna do brow L position, and then we're going to do brow L angle, brow L angle. Create. Nice. So we got all the brows done. We're gonna move to eyes next. So let's collapse that. IR warp. So what we want to do in IR warp is do an IR position. This is where our people will go. IR position. IR position, perfect. And again, that's inside. Just double check those. And then in IR position, we're going to create another deformer. And we're going to do for as many highlights as you have with your character. So I have 2 different highlights. So I'm going to do highlight R1 and go back to IR position, create another one and do highlight R2. You don't have to separate the highlights. You can also just keep them with everything else, but I like to because it gives you a little bit more control. So we got that done and we're going to do the same thing with IL warp. So I'm going to do another deformer and call this IL position. And then we're going to do the highlights. IL highlight 1. I'm just going to copy that so I can redo that. And then IL position, IL highlight 2. And again, make sure this is hierarchied both under the IL position as their own. You don't want to have this go to this and have this drop down, if that makes sense. See what I'm doing there? And I'll move both of those out. Okay, cool. So eye is done. Let's go to mouth next. In mouth, we're going to create a warp deformer for each separate piece. So whatever your mouth system is, you can do one for each separate piece. So for example, I'm going to do top lip, create a deformer, and then go back to mouth warp. You don't want to do a child of top lip. You want to keep making children of mouth warp. So we'd have a top lip, we have a bot lip. We go back, we have the teeth. So we're going to do teeth in there. We're going to go back to mouth warp. We're going to do tongue. So we got a tongue. And then we also go back to mouth warp and we have a back of the mouth. So back mouth. Awesome. So mouth is done. You can collapse that. For face warp's good to go. We can move on from that. Loose hair is good. I only have 1 piece of loose hair. If you had multiple pieces of loose hair, you might want to do multiple warp deformers in there, but now we're going to go to hair back. In hair back warp, we're going to do a hair back Z warp. So go ahead and create a deformer. Hair back Z warp. And then you're going to create a child of hair back Z warp called move hair back warp. Okay, nice. So we'll collapse that. That's good to go. Nose is good. You don't need to add anything to nose. Ears are good to go as they are, unless you had like something like earrings maybe on your character and you wanted those to dangle and have their own physics, which again, you can put that on the outside hierarchy then, how we have our choker and our chest plate separate, but you could probably put it in there as well. Next, we'll do hair front warp. So we're gonna, if you have a shadow underneath your hair, you're gonna want to create a shadow. I currently do not have a shadow underneath. I might go back and add one possibly later, but if you have a hair shadow, go ahead and create a warp deformer called hair shadow. And then in that, you're gonna do a move hair shadow warp. So you just go down the line like we did with the previous stuff. So it'll be hair shadow warp and then move hair shadow warp. But again, I don't have hair shadows for this character at the moment. This is just regular. So we'll leave that. For the other pieces of hair, if it's not shadow and it's just your hair like we have here, we're going to create a warp deformer called the hair front Z warp. And then we're going to create another one called move hair front. Nice. So hair front will be done. We can collapse that. Now for hair R warp, this is going to be a lot. So when you're doing the left and right side, you're going to want to do a warp for every single piece if you want maximum control. You could do it as a whole section, but then it's going to be more stiff. But once we get into our physics, that's going to be a little bit more important to have it split into all the different pieces that we have. So for hair R warp, I'm going to go into the hair R warp and I'm going to see what every type of hair R that we have is. So let me write this down. You could get a piece of paper if you need to. I'm going to look at all my hair rights. We have a hair side right 1. So we have a side right one. Honestly, what I'll probably do actually is I'm just gonna go through these and copy the name and go down the list. So hair side right 1, that's our first one there. I'm gonna turn it off just so I can know which one we're on at the time. Let's see, hair right warp, we're gonna do this. I'm gonna speed through this process so you can slow down the video if you wanna see how I do it, but do it to your particular pieces of hair. And don't forget to make sure it is the size of that piece of hair you're working with, the deformer. So for example, I just made one for this little guy, so I'm gonna try to make it as best as I can to this little guy's shape. There we go. And do that for the rest of them. All right, let's go into speed mode. Now we're gonna do the same exact things for all of hair L warp. So now that I don't have to scroll up, I know exactly what kind of pieces I need. It's just gonna be left instead. So we're gonna go for that. Nice, now all the hair is done, so we can go ahead and collapse that. And for neck warp, body X warp, chest plate warp, all this stuff, those are all good to go. We have all of our deformers set up for the most part. Again, we might add some later, so make sure you stick through the rest of the series if you get confused or get lost or something doesn't work out, because like I said earlier, I am also learning and there are some mistakes I make, so things will definitely need to be changed, but we're doing what we can with the knowledge we have. So I will see you guys in the next video, and we will start moving our parts into all the different places that they're supposed to be and hopefully start getting into some rigging. All right, I'll see you next time. Thanks for hanging out with us. Bye!